if you're not spending the time, the resource, or the money on having to create all that collateral, the expense attached to that is being redirected into more media, more localization or activation of content.
How do you then go about creating this? Especially back then, I think it would have been a little bit different to what it is now.
When we first iterated the product, we used to outsource like a consultancy firm that you can bring in and they're uber expensive on a daily rate. And I think we built the first proof of concept in 13 weeks and all it could do at that juncture was build a press ad. Now with the platform we've got, where every single media channel from high fidelity video, web content, social, animated or video content. But the evolution of the platform was print to now being able to do every single media channel.
It has more positive than negative in regards to local franchisee being able to show a local landscape job or talk about a local thing that's in the area that people would know. And it's generally, you can tell it's created by them.
I think that's right. If I go back to that automotive landscape where we came from, those guys are great at selling cars. They're not great at writing copy. They're not great at choosing the right media channel mix. They're not excellent at picking the right visuals to speak to their demographic. That's true of every franchisee, right? Unless you were previously a professional marketer, you'd come into a franchise business expecting to run the business, not have to be a specialized marketer.
So welcome, Andrew. Thank you for joining us today on the Franchise Marketer podcast. Now, Andrew, you're from a SaaS product company called Sesimi. Sesimi's your brand?
Sesimi's the brand.
Yep. SESIMI.com. It's got a great looking website. I've had a look there. It's got a great white paper as well and using AI so people can go there and download that. And basically you're the founder of this software. And what you can do is you can create, control and scale your brand from one place. And it's built for multi-location marketing teams. And I had a look at your industries on there. You've got automotive banking, but you've got franchise, which is obviously really relevant to this show and the people who listen to it. So let's first of all give a bit of introduction about yourself, why you decided to found this product and how is it relevant for franchisors and franchising?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Joel. Really appreciate you having me on the podcast. Yeah, so my background was I worked in finance. I realized I was actually no good at it. And then I got an opportunity over in the landscape of advertising and marketing. And that ultimately led to this opportunity to run an agency, which back in 2007, 2009 was called Hub Inc. And we ran the brand and retail creative work for Volkswagen commercial vehicles. And so what we were looking for, well, the very first foundations of this platform or this technology was we were looking for a way to be able to scale the content that we were producing, i.e. we were coming up with these national retail or brand campaigns. And yes, we were distributing it for Volkswagen commercial vehicles, but really our end customer or the ones that had the high level of demand was the dealer network, right? So classic franchise network, whether they want to admit it or not over in the auto landscape, they are fundamentally. And so what we were trying to find was a way that we could create this masthead content at a brand level and then give it to the retail network, but be sure that they could execute that content so that it was true to the original strategic thinking around the concept and then the finished artwork, but also making sure that they're true to the Volkswagen brand, but also true to all the compliancy and regulatory requirements around advertising standards across every single media channel. And we were like, when we first looked at it, we were like, surely we can license something like this. And we just couldn't find anything. So we actually just built it ourselves.
So before your product you built, would it be a thing where you just give it to the dealer and the dealer's responsible with their marketing personnel themselves in doing that sort of doing it themselves on their end without, and you guys sort of got to hope that they do the right thing?
100%. So the old way was create all the finished content, package it up in a packaged in design file because it was still 2007, 2009 and people were still doing a lot of print. We'd package up these finished artwork files and just send them out via FTP or drop them into a Dropbox or something similar. And then that location or that franchisee essentially would rip it down and then do whatever they wanted to that artwork. And or they'd have to go to the expense of using a third-party agency to execute that content across different channels. And it seemed archaic. It seemed fraught with danger, both for the brand and also the business that was recreating the content. So
you've seen the need for this, and then you've gone, all right, I'm going to now develop software for it, which is a bit of a story itself. I like hearing founder stories because I do think it's important. So you've seen a need for this product in the market. Obviously, there's nothing out there at the time that existed in this space. Now, how do you then go about creating this? Especially back then, I think it would have been a little bit different to what it is now.
100%. So when we first iterated the product, we used an outsourced software company called ThoughtWorks. They're like a consultancy firm that you can bring in and they're uber expensive on a daily rate. And I think we built the first proof of concept in 13 weeks and we launched it out into the market. And all it could do at that juncture was build a press ad, and you couldn't even see the press ad until you'd finished it and published it. Whereas now with the platform we've got, where every single media channel from high fidelity video through to web content, whether it be social, animated, or video content, all the way back down into old school print collateral. So DMs, flyers, A0 posters, high gloss magazine ads, newspaper print collateral. But really it's the evolution of the platform was print to now being able to do every single media channel. And it's instantaneous and it's completely visible through the entire process. So you get freedom within the framework in terms of what you can do based on what the business wants to let you as a franchisee do, essentially, or advertise or offer or create.
So it sounds like obviously it's a massive platform in regards of what you can do, because obviously everything's video now, short form video content, and we need volumes of it as an organization. So is this tailored for franchise brands? Obviously hearing out franchise brands would need this sort of thing. So how does it work with a large amount of locations, and how would it sort of work from your perspective in working with franchise brands with your product?
Where we see it coming into play for the franchisee as opposed to perhaps say the franchisor wants to push down very specific strategy, very specific content. For the franchisee themselves, what we want to be able to do is give them the ability to be able to change elements within advertising content to suit their demographic, their geography, their incentives and offers that they have the freedom to introduce into a piece of advertising content. The different products, every single franchisee typically has a different stock issue or a different product. For instance, Baker's Delight, when you walk into a Baker's Delight store, whether you walk into one in, I live in Beaumaris in Victoria, what's being sold on the shelves of Baker's Delight in Beaumaris, Victoria is different from what's being sold in, Double Bay in Sydney versus Brisbane city centre CBD in Queensland. So giving the franchisees that ability to geography, demographic, product, making sure everything's regulatory compliant, but then making it instantaneous so they don't have to go to the expense of using an agency and they don't have to go to the time delays associated with going to an agency or internal teams. That's really where we see the benefit to the franchisee directly.
Yeah, and I think the customers also want local content. They don't want just the stock corpse across, I guess, everything, right? So having some local touch that they're allowed to do from themselves, which adheres to what the head office is okay with, that's probably the way to go.
100%. And, a franchisee in Dubbo in New South Wales does not want to see Sydney city landscape shots behind the product, right? We want to localize it. And that's the way advertising content is just going generally. That highly personalized content that speaks to Joel, that speaks to Andrew, that speaks to someone else. That's what it needs to be these days to cut through the white noise. Like just having a generic ad, I don't think is doing that.
No, I agree. And I think, I call it franchisee generated content. So you have EGC, but you have franchisee generated content, and we're all for that. And we give guidelines to it, but let them do their thing. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's probably not the things you'd want out there, but it has more positive than negative in regards to, a local franchisee being able to show a local landscape job or talk about a local thing that's in the area that people would know. And it's generally, you can tell it's created by them. I think it's a massive advantage as opposed to, let's saying, here's a bunch of stock Canva templates promoting gardening and mowing, which is nothing local at all and gets literally no cut through online.
I think that's right. I think if I go back to that automotive landscape where we came from, those guys are great at selling cars. They're not great at writing copy. They're not great at choosing the right media channel mix. They're not excellent at picking the right visuals to speak to their demographic. That's true of every franchisee, right? Unless you were previously a professional marketer, you'd come into a franchise business expecting to run the business, not have to be a specialized marketer. So really what we're doing is through our tool, franchisor does all the strategy, does all the thinking, and then the franchisee has this ability to create content at scale really, really quickly with all the guardrails in there so that they can't go off piste is how I sometimes refer to it. Like you actually can't create an ad that isn't on brand or isn't compliant.
So is it something where a franchisee gets to log in and they go into like their own their portal and they have all the system, there's certain things they can change and they can't change that a lot? So how does it sort of look from a franchisee perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, we always talk about the franchisor being our client. Like that's typically who we contract with, but really our users are the franchisees. They're truly our customer of the platform. Like they're the ones coming in, they're the ones accessing and building content or accessing imagery and transforming it. But our front end is our back end. And so it's a very simple UX UI. I can bring it up on screen if.
Yeah, let's have a look. So if everyone's listening online, check out the YouTube video or check the videos. This is in real time.
Thanks, Joel.
Because the big thing for us in franchising, we do get approached sometimes from SaaS companies who have tried this. There might be like a multi-gym, it might be targeting gyms or gyms locations or things like that. So this is where it comes in place. So for me, I'd love to just see the back end, which we got up here, just to see how your product looks a bit different. It looks and feels from a UX UI perspective. And
thank you. Appreciate it. So I've obviously come in a, and I'll put in quotation marks, God mode. And we have a lot of different customer examples in here. But, for instance, I'll come in and I'll let's go into an auto experience template, right? So everything I'm about to show you is done from a single template.
Right.
And then I'll show you like a Baker's Delight, or I'll show you something else that's perhaps, more relevant to other franchise businesses. But this is a digital animated banner. And for someone to create this, you need to know HTML, JavaScript, React, because it's a responsive web banner. But I can instantaneously change this ad size to any ad size that I like, or potentially any custom pixel width and height that it might be applicable to then be hosted on your website as ad business. So you can see here how I'm actually changing the pixel and width and height. And every element from a branding perspective is responsibly moving to ensure brand integrity. That's one little bit of smarts baked into this platform. And then what you can see here on the right-hand side is it's effectively a paint by numbers, right? So the brand in this instance has said, we want the users to be able to choose from different background imagery, whether it be lighthouse, waterfalls. This is a North American ad for us, so it's a snowy landscape background, not necessarily relevant unless you're at a dealership up in the snowy or in the Victorian Alps. But we can change all of that content. And then what you can see is when I actually change the product from the red vehicle to the black vehicle, we're actually updating all the product details as well. And then the user can start to input their own headlines, or it can pre-select from a drop-down box. We also have AI help here where you could write a headline saying, hey, write me a strategic headline for a Hilux or a Tacoma in the North American market. And we've got AI built in and around this so that it will start to pull from a brand guidelines around tone of voice and the types of language that is applicable for that particular brand. And it will start to suggest relevant headlines. But you can see here, we can start to put a price in. If I want to get rid of the finance offer, I can do that, and it automatically changes the lockup. And then I can add my location details, and I can add that to my trade. That's a animated digital banner under 40 KB, ready to go to market instantaneously without having to have anyone in studio code it. I just build a leaderboard version of that. I just built a double MREC version of that. I need a wide skyscraper, but I want a red car instead. And now I want my finance offer back in. I've done that, and I've added that to my tray. So that's 4 digital animated banners good to go to market in about 40 seconds once you become proficient in using the platform. And that's, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of labor. It's 100% compliant with how the brand wants you or the marketer or the franchisee to represent the business. And it's completely regulatory compliant. So we also can also automatically update all the disclaimer content directly attached to that.
And I loved how quick it was. There was no loading, no nothing like that. And I've seen a few of these products before, and there's a loading time, and there's a little bit buggy and things like that. And that just how quick that was.
Yeah, well, we used to use a piece of technology that was Adobe InDesign Server, and now we're starting to get a little bit nerdy in the details. But it used to have to send all these high fidelity images up through the internet, and then make all those image transformations. But we've built all our own bespoke proprietary tech, and it's all web based. And so now it's instantaneous changes as you would expect.
So we're showing an example now of Baker's Delight, which is obviously a franchise chain in Australia. So if anyone's listening, check out the YouTube video for the full video demo. But let's check this one out here, as it's really real.
Yeah, so this is a piece of printed collateral as opposed to animated digital. But what you can see here is, we can automatically go from an A4 to an A5, for that in-store experience. Or if you need to go to a digital size, a Facebook ad or a post square, or into something differently again. So, being able to automatically update this content from landscape to vertical ad formats, as we can see there, and everything stays on brand. And then as I did with the vehicle, as I changed the product here from a scone pat to a white block loaf, you can start to see the different offers are starting to pull through directly into it. And that's another element that we do in our platform, which has a whole bunch of smarts attached to the different products to start to pull through either national price points or disclaimer content we were talking to IHOP up in North America, and they wanted us to be able to create menus that had very specific calorie information, because that's a big deal up in the North American market from a regulatory standpoint. In the digital ad format space, I was obviously looking to create digital files that I could supply. In the printed landscape, we can also do the same. So we can output high-res PDFs, JPEGs. We can do it in RGB or CMYK colorways. I guess the point of that is because we've come from an ad agency background, we've had to come at this from the perspective of what does a brand or a franchise and their franchisees need to be able to get into market really quickly, and to be able to supply the right file types to the right media channels, whether it's digital, printed, TV, etc., where they don't need to know what they're doing. From a technical aspect, like you need to be able to choose the products that you want to advertise and get the right price points in there potentially, but we don't want them having to worry about the file supply elements or aspects of any of this.
Now, is this something where, like, with, let's say, Baker's Delay, is this something where the local franchisees are accessing it, or they have access to their marketing agencies if they have to, depending on how they do that, to have access to it, or who's going into both?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So what we see with some of the retail groups or some of the larger franchise businesses is, or where they've got multiple franchises, perhaps they've got an internal marketing team, right?
Yep.
And so they're coming in and creating this content. We see individual franchisees come in, where they're a single store location, but the brand has given them access to the platform and they can come in and execute it. And then we've also seen them hand it off to their agency partners. So it might be an agency partner comes to the platform, they're producing the content, but now they're doing it faster. There's zero mistakes, and therefore they should be billing their customers less. So we're
You'd hope so anyway.
You'd hope so.
Yeah. That's for me. So I think the amount of creative opportunities, like an agency is always going to the people, we need creative, we need this and that, and there's waiting for approvals, and there's a back and forth and all that sort of stuff. Whereas they can basically have access to this now, and they can pretty much create all the variations they need on brand, and not even really even need to bother seeking approval if they've got the go ahead. So it means they can actually probably do more for the client in regards to the amount of creatives they can test and not have to second guess themselves.
And that's how we think about it, right? So the idea being is, if you're not spending the time, the resource, or the money on having to create all that collateral that I just showed you that you can very quickly do, the expense attached to that, I would hope, is being redirected into more media, more localization or activation of content. If you suddenly, as a franchisee, spent $2,000 less on creating content, that could be $2,000 that's spent into local activation or sponsorship partnerships with people in the area to drive more foot traffic into your store if you're a bricks and mortar franchise business, right?
Now, the one example I want to just run by Andrew just to see if we can do it. Let's say if we had a home services brand, we'll use us as an example, and you had, let's say, B-roll of a lawn being mowed or whatever. Now, obviously, on that, you keep the B-roll the same, but you could have different on-screen text like, Jim's Mowing is now in Warrnambool, or Jim's Mowing is now launching in, wherever. Would that be an example that would be that's something that could be done in your platform, or?
Yeah, so we've got actually really quite extensive video capability. So, when we first built the platform, it was all around print and collateral. Now I'm talking 2010. We've had to move with the times. And so being able to execute on video content, particularly given its prevalence on, social platforms, whether that's Insta or Facebook or whatever it might be, all the way up into, YouTube and Vimeo type channels, depending on what different organizations are running. We really needed to focus in on video capability. And so the platform has the ability to replace any of the written text dynamically in the platform. And that's the same as that other example I gave you, when we're changing price points or updating finance rates and things like that. But, users can automatically replace those supers, as we call them, any of the written content. We can replace the animation layers. So in terms of how that copy rolls directly through into the platform, we can replace backing music. We can replace different segments of B-roll footage, as you quite rightly described it as. So if you've got a 30-second spot that you need to fill, or a 45-second spot that you need to fill, you can actually piece together different edits of different elements of footage. And then all the way through to things like AI voiceover capability, right? So, AI is the hot topic, or flavor of the month, as it would be. Boy, it seems to be dragging on a lot longer than a month. But for instance, when you replace all those offers or the opening hours or contact details, you can also update it in our platform with the voiceover. and that will automatically flow through. So the vision will match the voice. Like from a video standpoint, we've had to move with times. We've had to make sure that everything's giving the franchisee or the franchisor, that freedom to be able to edit and change content on the fly without, again, having to go back into a studio, incur all the costs, incur the time delays, and, sometimes even like the reworks of things over and over and over again. So yeah, it's a pretty powerful element, and it's used heavily in our platform.
One industry I think really could use this is gyms or gym franchises. They have a lot of really good looking B-roll. There's obviously completely different when things are opening and different offers for members and things like that, but they always like to use really high quality B-roll, but then being able to personalize that at a local level, I can imagine it must be a nightmare at the moment for gym franchises in particular, with head office having I know one gym franchise actually has even started their own digital marketing agency. I think it's Anytime Fitness. And I can imagine a lot of that stuff would be taking existing content and ads and then making it for the local gym with different wording and maybe music and voiceovers and things like that. So would that be a relevant use case for this and save a lot of time for them?
100%. So anytime you need to change a video, you obviously need to have the capabilities either in After Effects or Premiere Pro or any of those video editing suites. And then you need to have the skills to be able to do that. It's not the skill set that typical franchise person has, right? Like coming to the franchise, they're either running a gym, they're running a mowing franchise, or another type of franchise. Their skill isn't in Premiere Pro and After Effects and making sure the sound levels are correct for the content that needs to get output. And so, our tool basically takes away those pain points, right? So the franchisor can get the content up into the platform, and we give the franchisee the ability to be able to make changes on the fly within the guardrails of the franchise wants, but hopefully with as much flexibility to really tailor that message for that local area marketing content.
Yeah, I also just think from a time-saving point of view, it'd be a headache not having to check things over and then all that sort of stuff, whereas they can come in here. We've seen how simple it is before with the easy demo and go over it. But if you want to pull up the screen again, let's just go back into it too and just see how it would work in reality with a video piece of content. So I think it'd be good to illustrate it.
And go into a very complex video, right? And these can be as simple as you want them to be, or they can be as complex as you like. So this is an actual demo advertisement we did for Stellantis. And for those of you who don't know who Stellantis is, it's Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, and Ram brands in the automotive sector. And what you can see down the right-hand side here is in the same way that we had over in the digital banner, all the elements that can get changed and replaced with different bits of functionality. And so this video has everything in it. It has voiceover, it has copy changes, it has resizing, it has choosing different file footage, different backing tracks, etc. Or it could just be simply a video that lets a franchise update their contact details, right? So we can operate at every single end of the spectrum. But I'm going to hit play on this. I'm going to leave the sound on. And in the very first instance, I'm going to switch between the backing tracks. And so one backing track is for one brand versus the backing track for another brand. But you can see how very quickly we can start to affect change to video content.
Make this the summer you realized the farther you go, the better it gets. The summer you secured a campsite that didn't require reservations, found a water park that didn't have lines, and realized that even out here, you're never alone. Make this the summer of Jeep with the most awarded.
Ram. So you can start to see that, you can affect change very quickly, instantaneously in the video. And this is like an offer end card for a piece of video content. So in this instance, if I wanted to, again, localize it with the background image, you can see there I've just changed the image directly in the video piece of content. And you can see here I've got different offer voiceovers, so different talent, so different voice tonalities and dialects directly in it. But then if I want to change the offer, it's 1.5% financing, 3 years, just no cost. I can't type.
No, but it's amazing just to see it in real time with that's going to be asset.
Yeah, so that's done directly in video, and then if I hit play, I can output that, and it's ready to go to market.
For me, I'm thinking about all the gym franchises for one. Like if they've got international footprint as well, this would be great for them. Obviously, you got Baker's Delight in Australia, which is a brand that people would know. We've spoke about previously, where people can see that. But I just think it'd be crazy, like Domino's. I'm just thinking like Domino's and all these fast food sort of joints with a lot of different locations, and plus that only, and they're in like multiple countries. Like this is a no-brainer for them as a product. I don't know what they'd be using as an alternative, to be honest.
Well, I think a lot of them are classically using studios and incurring the cost of doing it and the time delays.
You had a meeting with them? Like, I know this is not related, but for me, like, it's when I look at this, I'm thinking to myself, gym franchise, I'm thinking Domino's, I'm thinking all these QSR things. I think it's crazy that this is not, they're not using this already.
I think what we find with most organizations is, and I think this is true in Australia, there's somewhat of a reluctance to take a meeting because everyone's trying to sell something to everyone, particularly in marketing and sales, right? Like in the departments that would be looking at software products like ours, they're getting sold to every 5 seconds of the day. Like I imagine they wake up every morning and there's 15 emails from Andy Bakers. And so I think, sometimes just collectively as marketers, we should be dedicating some time to just understanding what is actually out in market, because just because the way we've done something for the last 10, 5, even 2 years doesn't necessarily mean that that is still current today. Even if I switch into this alternate version of a video piece of content, another piece of capability that we have is the instantaneous resizing of video content, right? So that video content is classically shot 16:9, so that landscape TV format. But then if you want to pull it into a social platform, you need to go to 9:16, which is, Facebook's, right? And then if you want to go into an Instagram platform, you need it to go into a 1-to-1 social platform size. And so we've got these AI smarts baked into the platform that maintains the focal point on the product or a particular element within a piece of content.
But that's a great point, because in Premiere, for example, you got to use auto tracking, and there's all these things. When you do this, it's just instantly done with the drop down. It's done.
It's instantly done. And then back to that example or what I was saying on the previous video, that ability to be able to change supers directly in content. In this instance, it's just a location detail, but imagine how much time it would take Bunbury Volkswagen to go into a platform, an editing suite, redo the VO, update the vision, replace the copy, and then track it manually so that the vehicles stay on screen and we're not cutting a car or the product or the dealership details halfway off a screen as we go from 16:9 to 1-to-1. It really is a time saver. It's a regulatory saving piece of technology.
I just think, like, even though we didn't cover this last time, I was thinking about it during the week, like, and I just thought absolutely makes absolute perfect product for a lot of these other massive, multinationals and franchise chains. But I was going to say, what you said, I think is really important about with marketing or just in general with people. It might be a bit hard with employees as well. Sometimes, like employees, sometimes just do the 9 to 5 and get by, but looking at what you do every week and saying, well, how can we do this better and where can we get more efficient and putting time aside for that? So, me personally, I do a lot of learning. I've got a lot of podcasts in the ears. I subscribe to a lot of different things and I've got little things like that. But I think that you're right. It comes down to marketing departments and leaders in those areas to actually putting aside a time every week to actually invest in looking at how can we do things better, and is there software or technology that can make our lives easier and make us more efficient. I don't think enough businesses do that at all, because for me, like, just as I said, if those marketing departments saw this or they knew about it, it'd be an absolute no-brainer. But go back to the platform as well. We're looking at it before, Andy. Is there anything else in there you want to demo while we're on the interview?
We do have a lot of capabilities, and mostly they're around image transformation when it comes to asset and content execution. What we talk about, or what we believe is that a business's brand is arguably one of its most important elements to be considered. Yes, staff, 100%. Yes, the product. Yep, absolutely. But people really start to recognize and understand brand when there's repetition in market. And so I think as marketers, we quite often get tired and bored of our content well before the consumer does. And so that's a real opportunity, I think, in a platform like ours to take a layout and then just refresh elements so that you can have all those resizing components and all the different executions. But in order to do that, you need to have lots of imagery and you need to have that to be really consistent. And so part of what we do is in our platform, and let's just assume that this is a particular product, doesn't have to be a car, could be anything, is we want to cut down the expense of producing like the mundane components that go into an ad or that go find their way into a campaign. So we don't need an ad agency to produce all the different variations of file type and supply. So you can see here, this has been uploaded as a PNG file. But if I need a GIF, a JPEG, a PDF, a WebP file execution, we can do that automatically in the platform. Fundamentally, what we're all about is brand protection and trying to change agency or internal studio or marketers' workflows so that they're having to do less, spend less in areas that they shouldn't be spending money in, because you can have automation in platforms like ours, and redirect it into more strategic thinking, more creative executions, or larger media buys. That's fundamentally what we're all about. And then we do have a marketing and a co-op and compliance budgeting toolkit, which manages franchisee marketing spends, that co-contribution up into a pool of monies we can then use as a bank balance or an audit trail directly in the platform. But that's definitely something else that we also offer around that marketing management side of things when it comes to budget.
Well, that's very handy because that can get very complicated, and the ACCC always changes rules, and there's more and more detail that needs to be provided with campaigns and things like that. So having a tool for that as well is massively beneficial.
And so what we find is a lot of brands actually use our platform, A, to store the content and distribute it, B, to create it. But then if your franchise network is creating content external to our platform or external to the content that you as a brand provided them, pull it back in through our funds management, co-op and compliance tool so that there is an audit trail of all the various ads that have been out of market by your brand or by your franchise network, so that you do have that audit trail for, if you're in Australia, the ACCC, if you start to find yourself in regulatory compliance issues, or if you're up in the US, the National Advertising Standard Bureau, all those types of organizations, of which there's many in the States, one for each state, that can all be, stored and housed in that co-op and compliance tool that we have.
One thing I want to talk about is the time investment. So someone sees this and goes, right, great idea. What sort of time, or is it a good opportunity for them just to clean house, maybe look at what they're actually doing and find out what they've got to centralize it all? Or what's the sort of investment, or what would you say to someone up front?
I would say, and I say this to every prospective client, the time it takes to spin the platform up is not us, it's you. For us, it's like an instantaneous spin up because we're obviously a software product. We need to ingest your content as well, which can take, a couple of weeks. But we typically talk to an onboarding process being roughly 13 weeks, primarily because marketing teams are really busy. What we're finding is marketing teams' budgets aren't growing. Teams are staying the same size, but yet they're having to do more with what they've got. And so that eats into that time frame quite a bit. But yeah, 13 weeks is kind of a pretty conservative estimate around how long it takes. And I would say the last 4 weeks of that are really doing some internal training, some external training across the network, juggling calendars and trying to make all those things align. It's not labor intensive. It's just logistically, we need to get all the ducks in a row.
I have a lot of people involved and they've got it. Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah. And it is a great time to clean house, right? Like it is a great time to work out which assets you want or need versus the ones that they're a little bit old and we really don't need these anymore.
Yeah, I think everyone should do that. But I think what a worthwhile exercise. But I think sometimes people might get put off by hearing 13 weeks. But just from what we've seen in the episode with the time saving, just how much easier it is. And that time that's going to save, like it could be 15 minutes here and there every now, with having not requests from this person and wait for this and check this and that. It would save the mountain of time in the long run. So just doing that investment at the front, look at what you're doing, make things better.
Yes. I mean, we have spun clients up in single figure weeks, like 2, 3. Depends on the size of the organization, depends how many assets are going to come across, depends how clean the data is, depends how many templates we need to pull into the platform, depends how big the network is to train. So that 13 really is like a broad brush, conservative kind of take on it. But we've absolutely spun up significantly quicker than that, 2, 3, 4 weeks.
And can you just go back to brand again? What do you mean, like with brand, we hear this word brand a lot. I hear all the time in gyms, obviously people go, it's the brand and this and that. It's sometimes people don't know what specifically you mean. So what do you mean by the brand? You mean, in your opinion, why should it be sacrosanct, or what should the value on a business put in this area?
Yeah, I think, branding's that element that I think a lot of people think to themselves, it's not really that important. But I think the brand is everything from your visual elements, i.e., your Gyms Group logo, your Gyms Group font, through to the imagery that you use for Gyms Group, just generally, depending on each element. It also then starts to filter down into the tone of voice, the level of service. Like I think brand has a really long tail to it. So, for instance, if you've got franchises out in the market who aren't living up to the Gyms Group brand standards, all the way through to, the way they present themselves, the way they talk, like every single brand has elements to it, either their visual, their cultural, their tonality driven elements. You think about Porsche, for instance, like you automatically think aspirational brand, premium luxury. You think about Nike, you think about that can do, get out there and just do it attitude, where you have the swoosh logo, and then the way that they talk is that overly confident kind of, we're going to win attitude to everything that goes out into market. And I think some of these brands, the more they go out into the market, the more you don't even really need to see the logos as much as you already understand that, oh yeah, that's a Nike ad, or that's an Apple ad, or that's a Jim's Group ad. And I think that's aspirational. And like, I'm obviously using large brands, but I think that is also true of, smaller groups like franchise businesses that have 10, 15, 20 locations. Like, there's a certain standard or expectation that I think comes with a brand. It is all those visual elements, but I think it floats all the way through to how people represent themselves out in the market and with their customers as well, that starts to build that brand.
And what do you think about the term brand marketing, which we hear a bit? There's the term brand marketing. I think marketing departments copying it at the moment. Well, they've always sort of copped it as well. They're always the first person to go, if revenue is not as good or whatever it is, but there's this whole concept of brand. And from your marketing perspective, what do you think about the whole concept of brand marketing? And let's say a smaller brand, a franchise brand just getting started, which a lot of people listening to the show, or a smaller brand in itself. What are some elements do you think they should concentrate on, or what do you think moves the needle from your experience?
I think consistency. I think, to your point, brand marketers, when sales aren't happening, can very quickly find themselves on the chopping block, them or HR. HR seems to be the other industry or, profession that people don't put a lot of value into, but actually at the end of the day, when you're running a business, the people are everything, right? So do they need a voice? Do they need a manager directly in the business? Probably argue that HR is one of the last things that should go. But anyway, we're talking about brand. I think brand marketers often get tarred with the brush that the brand marketing doesn't lead to sales, which I think fundamentally not true. If the Porsche brand marketers suddenly started producing content that wasn't aspirational, that didn't show Porsche as a premium product, etc., irrespective of the output from the factories, I'm not sure too many people would continue to pay a premium or want to go and actually purchase those vehicles if it wasn't that perception that the brand marketers at the end of the day are responsible for creating. So, that's that's a premium brand, but how do you create instantaneous recognition in market of a product or a business? That's the brand marketers doing that. If you left it up to retail marketers, that every ad would have a different message and a different look and feel and a different offer and a different incentive almost virtually every single day of the week. Because you're trying to find the sweet spot in terms of, from a retail perspective, what's going to drive Andy Baker into a bricks and mortar store or onto an online e-com platform. But at that point, all they're really doing is just driving the purchase right there and then. But what is it that actually gets Andy Baker or Joel to consider that product in the first place? And it's brand marketers. Yeah,
it's a great way to put it. Yeah, I think everyone thinks brand is important, but you're right. It's very hard to attribute that. But that's a really great explanation. And why do you want to buy a Porsche? As you said, it's the brand and what's gone into that over the years of being developed with that by people is the important thing. I think it's very hard for a lot of executives, or I guess you C-suite typical figures to understand that sometimes, especially now with it's so easy to create content online. I guess using AI and all these other things, there's a lot of I guess people would call the term AI slop and stuff. So I think
and I think that AI element of creating content is fantastic. What I don't think it's particularly great at is creating and maintaining consistent brand content.
It's definitely not. Yeah, you're right.
We play with these tools all the time. The quality of the output is typically driven by the quality of the input from a prompting standpoint. But what we find is every time we change the prompt ever so slightly, we're actually starting the whole creative or generation aspect from scratch. And so you end up, again, with a very different tone, a very different visual, a very different message. And it is quite difficult to get it right. I kind of liken it back to the iPhone when they came out with HD high definition cameras, right? I can take 1,001 photos and I can get, one photo that I think is fantastic. That does not make me a photographer. Just like putting AI creative generation tools in the hands of, again, me, does not make me a strategic brand or retail marketer or designer. Yeah, I might get one or two things right, but it just cannot get that consistency. And I think branding and retail advertising requires consistency, because back to the point I made earlier, I think us as marketers get very tired of content far faster than the consumer does. Like, I went to a conference the other week for the travel and tourism sector, and the CMO for the Australian tourism body, like, that was her number one message to everyone. Consistency is king or queen, depending on what gender you want to put on it. Like, it's that brand recognition, that consistency of look and feel and tone and voice in market is everything. And you see that across every single big brand. I don't, for the life of me, think that's any different at a smaller business level either. That consistency is really, really critical.
And I was going to say, with you mentioned AI tools before. Is there any AI tools that you thought were good in terms of doing this?
I use ChatGPT, but I that's the one I just consistently always fall back to. I know Adobe have some generative AI tools from a visual standpoint. Even a lot of the stock library imagery platforms are now developing their own AI capabilities. There's not really one that sticks to my mind, just because I think AI is great, but I think it needs to be used in ways that improve and enhance what we're currently doing rather than trying to go back to ground zero and make it do everything from scratch. That's certainly the way we think about it. So, the AI video resizing focal point technology that we use, we're not using AI to try and generate a car ad, because I just don't think it's there yet. But what we are doing is using it to help that brand extend their content so that they can use it in more places.
Yeah, I'll give you, we actually used to do this a lot back 5-6 years ago. We do we shoot 16:9 video, like day in the road thing, and obviously you have to repurpose it to vertical for TikTok, for Reels and stuff like that. And yeah, my team spent a lot of time just having to retrack it and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's a really great use of the AI in the product, and just an absolute time saver, because I used to take my boys a lot of time 5-6 years ago in Premiere. So I think that's a great use case. But yeah, it's interesting because, as we were talking about last time, there's some brands like Coca-Cola and stuff have used AI. It seems to be, like on to you last time, was like a lot of crypto companies in America, for whatever reason, like Cowshy and stuff, are going viral with these fully 100% AI ads. So it seems to be, in some areas, it's being used a bit more just, I guess, just to go viral and things like that. Whether how much that helps with the brand and the product's another story. But I think it's going to be definitely interesting, especially in the video generation stuff, which hasn't really hit here yet, like the Sora 2 over in UK and the US, which is everywhere, and it hasn't sort of hit here. And seeing the response, what will actually customers or consumers think towards businesses that actively are using that in their marketing? Will they repel against it, or will they not care? If it's, that's the sort of thing I'm sort of wondering about what will happen.
I think when you've got big budgets and you've got virtually unlimited resources and access to companies and production agencies and the like, I think you're going to get a much better result, because these businesses are trying to promote their AI technology, and they are going to help you build out something that is pretty incredible, i.e. the Coke content. Adobe Firefly is pretty great.
The one I use a lot is that probably, I like Ideogram, and there's a few other AI infographic tools that I do find handy, but they all need adjustments as well.
They all need adjustments, and it all needs a tweak, and it always is. In my experience, it's like 90% great and 10% you just can never quite get to the right point, and you kind of walk away thinking, I'm going to have to do this the old way to get it to exactly what anyway, and maybe you shouldn't have bothered spending all that time up front. But look, it's a hot topic, and I think people are silly to not be looking at it and trying to implement it, but there definitely needs some further advancements, I think.
Absolutely. Now, we spoke about last time, but a lot of your product improvements, they come from users at the ground level, or what's the sort of the roadmap, and how do you do it with your product?
If I wind the clock back to 2010, we were purely just a print production platform. So all we could do is produce content for newsprint, advertising. And so the way we think about it, what's the latest trends in terms of advertising and marketing? What are the channels we need to be in? And so that typically informs our product roadmap. So for instance, when we saw a need for video resizing, or we saw different templates pulling into the platform and them being separate templates, but we just look at that and go, how can we automate that? When we saw a move away from, I even forget what it was called, but when we had to move into HTML5 digital animated banner coding back in like 2017, 2018, when we were implementing that. And so we were seeing these trends happening in the market, and that's typically what informs the way we build out our product. And so we're live with customers across 4 continents. And so we see trends come out of Europe, we see trends come out of Asia Pac, we see trends come out of the US. And so we pump those trends into our development team, and they're starting to think about how they can actually execute against those trends and make sure that the next market is already ahead of what we're already seeing in another market, if that makes sense.
Let's go back to the franchisee level real quickly. Do you have any feedback from the ground level with franchisees? Let's say, I think Baker's Delight was what we were showing before, on their franchisees at a store level. Because I can imagine they're obviously busy doing baking, and there's a whole bunch of other things that are run their business. So do we get any feedback from that ground level in terms of what they use it for, or any sort of problems that solve for them?
Yeah, so I mean, ticket price points or ticketed price points is a big one for the Baker's Delight crew. The products that they sell in Camberwell Baker's Delight versus the products they sell maybe in, say, Metro Brisbane Baker's Delight store can be quite different and varied. I learned when we were onboarding them was, a Baker's Delight store might have 50 products tops, but there's some couple of hundred, if not into the early thousands of products that could be chosen from at each bakery to be able to produce and sell. And so them being able to come in and be able to change or create price points for tickets to go in store for, that traditional POS type scenario has been really powerful for them. Like, it's given them the ability to do that. Again, back to the point where they want to do it, but they're very busy running a store, making the produce that goes into that store each day. So anything that you can just take it away and make it very, very simple for them to execute against means that they are going to be consistent with how they represent the brand in each location. So yeah, the UX UI is a big one from a franchisee's perspective. Can I come in? Can I access what I need to access? Can I create it really quickly? And is it pain-free? That's a massive one. And then the other bit of feedback we get is if there aren't templates in the platform, but there's a particular media channel that they want to advertise on, it's not that the platform itself can't execute against that channel. It might just be, hey, can you talk to the head office about, hey, we need TikTok video content, for argument's sake.
It's a very good use case as well. And I think it's something where hopefully other brands see this, because I think it's an absolute no-brainer from seeing how good and quick the platform is, which I've complimented enough times at the speed of it, because that's the one thing I really, really like to see. But obviously there's so many use cases that I know the existing franchise brands who watch all this and this will be doing this the way you've been talking about before, with having to wait and go back and come and forth. And whereas with this thing, it's just ready to go. And it's been around for 14 years, I think you were saying before, how long you've been doing it for.
We've been around for 15. Yep. We ran it side by side with our ad agency until 2015, and then we shut the agency down because this was just far more interesting and fun.
I'm going to say it's a bit more fun than doing it in a second, imagine.
Yeah. I mean, advertising is a great industry, and I certainly learned a lot, but this is much more engaging and much more interesting. Personally. Yeah.
Absolutely. So where next for the product then for you? Obviously, you got a roadmap in place, which is going to be coming. Like, where do you see next 2 to 3 years? What are the needs you think to businesses using your product? What things are coming?
So for us, at the moment, what we need to do internally is we need to ingest a brand's templates or a brand itself. Yeah. When we talk about AI, we're looking very heavily into agentic templating so that we don't need to actually have the manpower or the studio team creating those templates so that they can get executed across the platform. So agentic templates, one of those things that we're looking at so that we can do those elements faster, i.e.
Can you just go back to that? Sorry, Andy, talk about agentic in general. So you mean like an AI agent? So people might be familiar with AI agent, like something like Manus or GenSpark, or can you describe what that means from your?
Yeah. So at the moment, what we need to do when we ingest, say, a Jim's Group brand or template, we actually have to manually code that into our platform. And so what we want to use is AI or LLMs so that when we are ingesting a brand, we don't need to necessarily always be recreating those templates through hand-rolled code. So have AI build out the templates and ingest the brand automatically for us.
And could you see like an AI agent then going off and then building? Is that what you're talking about, really, or building the templates? Yeah,
absolutely. Going off and then building the templates into the future. So a use case for us is and again, I'll use Jim's Group. For instance, if you gave us a retail template that had a particular layout, and then you gave us another template that had another retail layout, and we've trained our agentic AI templating tool to be able to read these templates and then go and execute. What does a retail template layout look like for Jim's Group? We could build a multitude of different layouts, all on brand, that we don't need to ingest, that are just there, sitting there as a library for you to be able to utilize. Whereas at the moment, every retail layout you give us, we have to ingest and hand roll the code so that we can execute all the different ad sizes and variation pieces. That's one thing. So we're looking at using AI and agentic templating from the perspective of how do we speed up our own internal flow processes. And then I think, contrary to what I was saying before about generative AI, I do think there is a role for a platform to play about using the best of Gen AI from a creation standpoint, from a visual aspect, that could then get pulled into some of these branded templates.
What's an example with that one? That sounds interesting to me. That'd be interesting to people, I reckon. Well,
yeah,
of that.
Yeah. So, in that Toyota ad that I showed you, where I showed different backgrounds, having gen creative AI, where you could ask our platform to produce you a different background to suit Dubbo, for argument's sake, or Wonthaggi or suburban Perth. Being able to pull in gen creative AI into our template so that you don't need to again do all the heavy lifting through an ad agency to produce that imagery, I think would be quite powerful. And then having it be able to recognize, the shadows and the layout so that the angle of the image is correct to suit the product sitting on top of it correctly.
Mm.
So these are all the things we think about from how do we help a brand create more content that is more highly personalized, that's more likely to be recognized.
And it makes it doable as well, because obviously that'd be a lot of work without something like that. And if you got locations all around Australia, you can get really hyper local with the imagery you use, really, really specific from what I can get the sense of, which would be very unique. I don't know if there's anything around that does it.
Yeah, I think not from that hyper localized perspective. If you think about if you had a library of imagery that means that, in say Camberwell in Victoria, right? At most, using an agency or your brand, you probably get 1 or 2 images that are localized to Camberwell in Victoria. But if you had a really, really powerful generative creative engine or tool that could be applied to that, and you could get photos of Baldwin Road and Deep Dean Road and things and elements in and around your local vicinity that even more highly personalize that content to the extent that you can, I think that starts to become pretty interesting.
Absolutely. Like I'm just nodding my head going, like that'd be amazing, because I guess at our level anyway, like with our franchisees, we allow them to create local social media content, right? So you get that indirectly in, you get that in the backgrounds, or you get that in the imagery sometime. Like being able to do that at scale with, let's say, if you've got 700 locations in Australia and have something that's specific to each location using, an agent to generate the image or whatever it is, that'd be pretty amazing. I don't think there's anything that's out there that does that.
No. And again, we're talking future state, right? But these are the things.
That's what could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. These are the things that we turn our attention to and look for. And either we look to introduce the best tools that we can. AI, for instance, we've incorporated Amazon's AI voiceover. That's what powers our voiceover capabilities. We use another software product called Algolia, which, creates all the search indexes.
The AI Dominic search. Yeah. Algolia.
Yeah, exactly. So we have specific IP in our platform around how we extend content across all those different ad sizes and that creative automation piece. But then, we're looking to borrow best in class other tools to even extend that experience even further. So we're not going to go out and build a generative AI tool. We're going to look to leverage something that helps us bring that capability into our platform to then give it to the franchisor and the franchisee to then extend their content even further.
Because as a brand, I'm thinking like myself, you always hear, a lot of misconceptions with franchises, with just in the general community. They don't understand they're local all the time and stuff like that. And I think being able to really show, in all the creative assets that they do, if this is in place really easily, how local in everything with the imagery and all that sort of stuff, with really low effort, I guess, from the franchisee would be absolutely worth its weight in gold. And obviously would drive better results at a local level, I can imagine, from their marketing efforts.
Yep, I'm in complete agreement.
Yeah, and nothing further to that, I guess, in that regards. But I think it's really exciting as well. And do you think that's where, like, obviously in your platform, just in general, like, where the most advancements, let's say, the AI will that just really be able to just do that? The example you said, the AI agent sort of use case of the localized, let's say, imagery, whatever. But was there anything else that you could think of as a use case in the future where something like that could be on the radar?
I think the creative asset execution piece, I think, will absolutely speed up, and I think it will find its way into tools like ours. Canva has gen creative tools in its platform. I can't speak to the quality of them. I've not really used it, but I know that tools like that are finding their way into people's everyday use. So I just think the ability for people to be able to learn how to prompt these things to get better results, I think the technology is going to continue to improve, and I think we're just going to get more and more exposure to it. Where we take it is always going to be around brand and brand consistency, but the ability for users to be able to produce content at scale. That's how we think about it. So whether that's AI voiceover or video resizing or copy generative type tools, again, like what we've built into our platform, it's all going to be about extending the great work that gets done within brand and retail marketing teams in-house, as opposed to trying to replace them. Because I think the other really interesting tidbit I got recently from another conference I attended, and again, it was around AI and that gen piece, was even some of the content that gets generated that is incredible still misses or lacks that human element or feel to it. It's close, but it doesn't necessarily always portray the right feelings or emotions that the brand is trying to achieve. And I'm sure that's an incredibly difficult prompt to give an AI engine like humanity. Yeah, it was really interesting. And so this was a marketer at a CMO conference down on the peninsula last week. And to a letter, there would have been 200 CMOs in there, and virtually every single one of them said, we're looking at ways to use it, but we're not there yet. We're implementing it, but it isn't giving us the desired results.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's amazing technology, but there's still a long way to go. And obviously, quality of the prompt and actually science of it doing a good prompt in itself, but also this. It's quite funny. I watch a lot of stuff and a lot of the marketers and things. Everyone says storytelling. And you think AI, with what it's been trained on, could tell a better story than a human sometimes, and you'd think it would. We would, and a lot of the time it doesn't. So I think it's still a way to go, and I do think but it's exciting hearing about what it can do with your product potentially, because that's for me, I've never heard of anything being able to do that. And I just think from massive chains or businesses with multi-sites, just being able to do that, it would be a massive, massive advantage for franchisees at the level. And would also, Andy, make that business, in my opinion, if I'm a prospect and I'm looking between 4 or 5, let's say, similar businesses as a gym chain or a food chain or whatever, knowing I had access to that technology to be able to do that makes that franchise system actually more attractive. I don't think it's a benefit we've spoken about before, but I think as a franchise prospect, knowing that was a part of the system I get access to would make it a lot more attractive proposition for me than someone who doesn't have that.
And again, just to be really transparent, this is what we're thinking about, not what we currently have in the plate. But I don't think other businesses or other platforms that are similar to ours, I don't think they're thinking at this level.
I can assure you they're not, from what I know and what I've seen. So that's why I wanted to make it very clear, because it's very exciting. And I think having your business for 15 years around, you're not going anywhere, and you're obviously investing a lot of money back into the business to do all these things for people. So it's a great thing where the customers who are within your product system get this sort of forward thinking and access to these things when it hopefully does happen. Now, I was going to say that as well, Andy. A couple more questions before I let you go, and thank you very much for jumping on again. As I said before, we had technical issues for people, and even now, Riverside, it's not recording. It's not showing us live stream, but you're a founder of a SaaS company for 15 years, and I think people, it's got this thing now. You can just go to Lovable and type in a prompt, and all of a sudden you got an MVP, and you can do 10K, 5K revenue a month, and away you go. But vibe coding, we spoke about it before, but vibe coding, obviously SaaS as an industry, how do you think AI is going to sort of disrupt that? Is it going to reduce the number of players? Is it going to increase the number of players in the market? Where do you think that's all going to go?
I think it's a fantastic place to start. I think it is a really good place to build an MVP. I think you almost need to take a step back from vibe coding, right? Like in some instances, people will build a product and then try and sell it with no real understanding about, I guess, their target audience, the end user. So vibe coding, great. Go for it. Fill your boots with it and build as much as you can. I think ultimately at some point you're going to need coders in there to be able to, again, take it that extra step and really build out some key specific features and, develop the UX UI in and around the tool that you build. Because I'm not sure you can get all the way there yet. But I think what made us successful was we pitched and sold the idea, and we had a client before we'd actually even built it, because we had all the industry knowledge in and around the automotive sector from the agency side of things that we ran. We actually understood intently the problem that we were trying to solve. And so I think, yes, use vibe coding to build the MVP, but I think you need to understand the problem that you're trying to solve really, really deeply. And where you can have a customer already lined up.
It's great advice, and I think that's something that when you look at a lot of these founder interviews, a lot of them say the similar sort of thing as well, and taking it back to what's the problem you're actually trying to solve, and can you get it validated with people who might need the product, and before you do anything. And I think that's obviously from your story, what we've spoken about earlier, that's exactly what you've done. Now, also as well, entrepreneurship seems to be there's a lot of shows around entrepreneurship, and obviously there's a lot of things where people are encouraging or looking at side hustles or small businesses now. But as someone who's done it for 15 years, entrepreneurship, how would you describe it?
I said this to you last time we recorded this week. It's like, I don't necessarily purport to love Elon Musk, but there's this one quote that he does have that I like, which is running a startup or building a startup is a bit like chewing glass, and you have to smile whilst you're doing it because no one wants to hear how hard it is. So love or hate the guy, I do like that quote, and I feel like it's pretty apt for startups or entrepreneurship just in general. Like, unless you discover this bazillion-dollar idea that everyone wants immediately out of the gate, you are going to have to put in the hours. You are going to have to spend the time. You're going to fail lots, and you're going to have to keep getting up off the floor and going again the next day. Sorry.
Well, not many businesses make it to 15 yees, Andy. So how have you been able to do it in a really competitive field? I personally, how have you been able to do it? It's just a matter of where you just love what you're doing and just want to constantly improve it, or how have you stayed doing it for so long?
I think there's a deep love love is probably not the right word, but like there's just this inherent problem in this advertising and marketing sphere where a lot of organizations and businesses aren't adopting automation. And so I look at that and I just think to myself, there's just such an addressable market. It's such an exciting thing. And to your point earlier, I don't understand why my phone doesn't ring off the hook from franchise businesses, because they all have this same problem. How do we maintain consistency across our network? How do we give them a tool that is really easy to use so that we don't have to keep going through all these approval workflows and they can get advertising content out in market really, really quickly? Like, I love the fact that we've solved that. Now I just need to get it into more people's hands. And I enjoy the challenge of that as well. So yeah, it's definitely been, anyone who thinks a SaaS business is an overnight success probably needs to go and talk to the founders, because it will have been umpteen dozen of failures on the journey. Like 100% we've failed in a whole raft of different places. We've built the wrong kind of templating technology. We've, spent money in marketing and advertising in spaces that we shouldn't have. We've hired the right people, we've hired the wrong people. It's just a journey. You just got to keep working at it. And that line, 1% better every day, that's somewhat true.
Well, that's exactly what Jim does in here. Is one thing is like, look at what you do every day and how can I make it better? And that's the question he always asks himself still. He's 73. And believe me, he does. It's probably a lot more now than what he used to, but that's still a simple principle, I think, which he lives by. And I think that's a really good thing as well. And hopefully businesses listening to this and going, geez, I need them. We can do things better, and let's reach out. But Andy, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for jumping on. As I said, it's the first time I've ever happened with Zoom and not recording. So we're using Riverside, and it should be all sweet. I'm going to send you an email after this confirming. But real quickly, it's Sesimi, so SESIMI.com. You guys are obviously active on LinkedIn as well. I will say this: if you're a franchise brand and you're going through, just reach out to Andy and see what they can do. Because from knowing the industry and knowing what's out there, and knowing multi-location franchisors and all that sort of stuff as well, this would be a massive problem. And your product, as we've demoed on here, solves it. And I think it will save a lot of time, make a lot less stress for franchisees at a local level, and save a lot of time internally for marketing teams. So hopefully they reach out to you.
No, I appreciate it. And yeah, welcome the opportunity to have a conversation with franchises, big or small, because like I said, we're here to try and help solve a problem and make life easier for marketers just in general. But really appreciate your time, Joel. It's been fun.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate that.